There's a question that goes deeper than any one culture or religion. A question that echoes through time and touches something raw in all of us. What happens to the souls of children who leave this world before they've even had a chance to truly live? It's not a question limited to any one belief system. Whether you're atheist, Christian, Muslim, spiritist, or follow a different spiritual path altogether, when faced with the loss of a child, something inside us reaches for answers. Because this kind of loss, it doesn't just challenge us, it shakes our understanding of how the world is supposed to work. Why would a life so full of potential be cut so short? Is there a reason we just can't see? A bigger plan we don't yet understand? Throughout history, civilizations have tried to answer this heartbreaking mystery. The ancient Egyptians believed that children were pure and entered the afterlife without needing judgment. The Greeks said the gods watched over them with special care. And many Native American tribes believed that children who passed early had brief but powerful spiritual missions, almost like little messengers from the other side. But this isn't just ancient philosophy. Even today, in our modern scientific world, people still wrestle with this same question. Parents, therapists, spiritual teachers, and researchers are all trying to understand not just what happens to the body after death, but what happens to the soul, to the essence of a child. And what makes this question so powerful is that it connects us all. No matter where you're from, what language you speak, or what kind of life you live, when a child passes, something universal stirs inside us. There's a kind of energy children carry that's hard to put into words. If you've ever spent time with a little one, you know what I mean. They live in the moment. They love without hesitation. They forgive easily. They're present in a way we adults often forget how to be. It's as if they're still tuned in to something deeper, something purer, like they haven't yet been shaped or scarred by the weight of the world. And so, when a child's life ends too soon, it's not just a personal loss. It's like a sacred window closing. A reminder that life is more mysterious and more delicate than we usually admit. That's why in this video, we're going to explore this question through many different lenses: religion, spirituality, science, personal stories, and see what they all have to say about what happens to the souls of children. Because when we talk about this subject, we're not just exploring what happens after death, we're also touching the very core of what it means to be alive. So, take a deep breath, find a quiet place, and come with me on this journey. Because what you're about to hear may not only bring peace to your heart, it might just help you see the world in a completely new way. Have you ever watched a child completely lost in play, totally absorbed in their own little world? There's something magical about it. They aren't worried about being judged or whether they look silly. They're not thinking about the past or the future. They're just there, fully present, fully alive. That's not just a cute personality trait. Spiritual traditions from around the world tell us that this is actually a glimpse of something deeper, the natural state of the soul. Many believe that children arrive here carrying a kind of energetic purity. They're still closely connected to whatever realm they came from before this life, and that connection hasn't yet been dimmed by pain, trauma, or the conditioning that piles up as we grow. In Hindu philosophy, there's a powerful concept called samskaras. These are the mental imprints and emotional patterns we accumulate across lifetimes. According to this belief, young children haven't yet built up enough samskaras to cloud their divine connection. That's why a child might ask a question that seems impossibly deep, or seem to know something no one taught them. Some kids just radiate a sense of peace or joy that feels otherworldly. In the Christian tradition, we hear this echoed in one of the most well-known teachings of Jesus. "Let the little children come to me, for the kingdom of heaven belongs to such as these." This wasn't just a sentimental gesture. It was a spiritual recognition. Acknowledgement that children possess something sacred, something adults spend a lifetime trying to reconnect with. So what exactly makes a child's soul so special? Part of it comes down to how they interact with reality. A child doesn't separate the spiritual from the physical the way we adults do. To them, invisible friends are just as real as anyone else. Angels? Magic? Talking to grandma even though she passed away last year? None of it seems weird. It's normal to them. Because they haven't been taught to doubt yet, and that lack of mental filtering is powerful. Some children describe colors around people, auras. Some say they've met beings of light. Others recall dreams that seem eerily prophetic. Science might dismiss these as imagination, but in many spiritual systems, they're seen as natural gifts, manifestations of a soul that hasn't yet been weighed down by the fears and filters of adult life. Even neuroscience backs some of this up. Studies show that children's brains have incredible neuroplasticity. They're absorbing information at lightning speed, not just from this world, but possibly others. And in terms of energy, there's something else worth noting. In Eastern traditions, we talk about chakras, the energy centers of the body. For kids, these energy centers are still wide open. As we get older, those chakras start to close or get blocked as a way of coping with stress, fear, or trauma. But in children, the energy flows freely, which is why some shamanic traditions call them bridges between worlds. They still move naturally between different states of consciousness, dreams, visions, spiritual impressions, without effort. So when a child tells you they saw something, felt something, or just knew something, they might be telling the truth. Not truth as in fact-checked by science, but truth as in experienced, felt, known on a soul level. That purity also shows up in how kids approach love. They don't hold grudges. They don't care about appearances. They forgive instantly and love without hesitation. Their hearts are wide open. And that's what makes their early departure so incredibly painful, but also so spiritually significant. Because when a child passes, they carry that purity with them. They haven't gone through the long forgetting process that we adults face. They still remember, on some level, who they are and where they came from. So their journey back to the spiritual world is often seen as smoother, quicker, more direct. They return with the same light they arrived with, only now, carrying the love they gave and received during their time here. This difference in spiritual weight, if we can call it that, is at the heart of why nearly every religious or spiritual tradition treats the death of a child as something different, something sacred. All around the world, across centuries and belief systems, there's been this shared intuition that the souls of children follow a unique path after they leave the physical world. Take Christianity, for example. For a long time, the Catholic Church taught the concept of limbo, a kind of in-between realm where unbaptized babies would go. It wasn't heaven, but it wasn't a place of suffering either. More like a peaceful pause, where these souls lived in natural happiness, but without the full presence of God. But that view changed. In 2007, the Vatican released a statement with a very different tone. It said there's a well-founded hope that children who die without baptism are saved and welcomed into heaven. That shift wasn't just theological, it was emotional. It acknowledged that the purity of a child's soul matters more than any ritual. Protestant Christianity has always leaned toward this understanding. Many denominations believe that children who die before reaching what's called the age of reason go straight to heaven. They're considered innocent, incapable of sin in the conscious, moral sense. John Wesley, the founder of Methodism, even said clearly, all children who die in infancy are saved. And then there's Islam, the Quran and the Hadith. The sayings of the Prophet Muhammad paint a beautiful picture of what happens to children after death. It's said that when a child dies, they go straight to Jannah, paradise. No conditions, no judgment. Even more comforting, there's a belief that these children become little birds flying freely through paradise, that they wait at the gates of heaven, refusing to enter until their parents arrive. It's a powerful image of spiritual loyalty, of family bonds that stretch beyond death. In Judaism, the focus is also on purity and righteousness. Children who pass before they've had a chance to sin are considered tzaddikim, the righteous. They go directly to Olam Haba, the world to come, and their souls aren't forgotten. In fact, Jewish tradition teaches that studying Torah in a child's memory can elevate their soul even higher, bringing them closer to the divine. But when you move eastward, the ideas become even more layered. In Hinduism, for example, children who die young are believed to be advanced souls. Souls who only needed a short earthly visit to complete a specific karmic task. They weren't here by mistake. They had a purpose, even if brief. Some texts refer to these souls as Bala Muktas, those who gained liberation early. They may have come to give or receive unconditional love, to fulfill a promise, to help a family grow spiritually in a way that only their short presence could catalyze. It reframes the loss, not as a punishment, but as a divine mission, completed swiftly. And then there's Buddhism. In Tibetan Buddhist thought, children who die before the age of 7 skip the bardo, the transitional state adults go through after death. Why? Because their consciousness is still fluid, uncontaminated by ego or attachment. They pass directly into higher realms, often aided by their positive karma from previous lives. All these traditions, different in language, culture, and theology, end up pointing toward the same truth, that the souls of children are sacred, and that the universe itself seems to rise up to protect, guide, and welcome them. Now, there's one belief that has both fascinated and comforted people for generations, especially those grieving the loss of a child. It's the idea of immediate reincarnation. This concept suggests that when a child passes away, their soul doesn't spend long in the spiritual realm. Instead, they return to earth quickly, sometimes even into the same family or circle of loved ones. It might sound far-fetched at first, but this isn't some New Age idea. It's rooted in ancient spiritual traditions. In Tibetan Buddhism, for example, lamas have long believed that enlightened souls can reincarnate rapidly. They've even developed detailed methods for identifying young children who carry the spirit of a previous master. Why would a soul choose to come back so soon, and more than once? Imagine you're trying to learn a complex skill, like playing a musical instrument. Instead of sitting through one long, exhausting lesson, you might choose a series of shorter, focused sessions, each one zeroing in on a different piece of the puzzle. That's the logic here. Some souls may choose multiple short lives to experience specific lessons quickly, without the long emotional entanglements of adulthood. One of the most respected researchers in this area was Dr. Ian Stevenson, a psychiatrist from the University of Virginia. He spent decades documenting over 3,000 cases of children who claimed to remember past lives, and some of the most striking patterns. Children who died young in a previous life often reincarnated sooner and frequently nearby. Some even came back into the same family. Even more astonishing, many of these children had birthmarks or physical traits that matched the wounds or illnesses that caused their death in the previous life. One famous case is that of Swarnata Mishra, a girl from India who, at just 3 years old, began speaking of a life she lived in another town. She named names, described places she had never visited, and even recognized people she'd never met. When investigators brought her to that town, her memories checked out with uncanny precision. But what really makes immediate reincarnation so powerful, especially in the context of children, is the idea of family missions. According to some spiritual philosophies, groups of souls travel together across lifetimes. They make sacred contracts before incarnating, agreeing to play different roles for each other, parent, child, sibling, friend, in order to help one another grow. So when a child passes and returns as a younger sibling or cousin, it might not be a coincidence. It could be the same soul, fulfilling another aspect of that spiritual contract. In Spiritism, particularly the teachings codified by Allan Kardec, This concept is explained in even more detail. There are what spiritists call missionary spirits. These are evolved souls who choose to incarnate for brief periods to awaken specific emotional or spiritual responses in others, like compassion, forgiveness, or unconditional love. Their short time on Earth isn't a failure. It's part of the mission. And once that mission is complete, they often return, sometimes as a sibling born months or years later, or as a relative who enters your life in a different form. Some parents have shared astonishing stories. Babies born after the death of an older sibling who show eerily similar behaviors or preferences. Children who calm instantly when placed in a deceased sibling's room. Toddlers who react emotionally to objects they've supposedly never seen before, but which belong to a sibling who passed away. It's as if the soul never really left, just returned through a different doorway. In this view, loss becomes less about endings and more about continuity, about sacred contracts being fulfilled in chapters we don't always understand right away. Now let's explore something that often gets overlooked in discussions about the afterlife: the children who come back. When we hear about near-death experiences, we usually think of adults describing tunnels of light, peaceful beings, or life reviews. But there's a lesser-known category of near-death experiences that might just be the most revealing of all, those reported by children. And here's the thing: kids don't come with the same emotional filters or cultural baggage that we adults do. They're not trying to sound wise or mystical. They're just telling you what happened. Take Dr. Melvin Morse, a pediatrician who's spent decades studying these cases. He's documented hundreds of reports from children who were declared clinically dead and then revived. The results? Surprisingly consistent. Children describe floating above their bodies, moving through tunnels or fields of light, meeting beings who radiate love, and, more often than adults, they say they encountered relatives, sometimes relatives they never met in life. One case that stands out is Katie, a 6-year-old who nearly died during heart surgery. When she came back, she described meeting her great-grandfather, someone she had never seen, not even in photos. She recounted details about his appearance and mannerisms that shocked her parents, things only close family members knew. And then there's Colton Burpo. You might have heard his story. It became the subject of the book and movie Heaven is for Real. At just 4 years old, Colton underwent emergency surgery and was clinically dead for several minutes. When he recovered, he started talking about heaven, about angels, music, and even Jesus. But the detail that left his parents speechless. He mentioned meeting his sister, a sister who had died in the womb before Colton was ever born, a child his parents had never spoken to him about. He knew her, he described her, and he said she told him she couldn't wait to meet the whole family someday. What makes these stories so powerful isn't just the content, it's the tone. Children describe these experiences with the same kind of matter-of-fact calm they might use to talk about recess. To them, what happened was real, not a dream, not a hallucination, just something that occurred. Another researcher, Dr. Kenneth Ring, found that kids who go through near-death experiences often come back changed. They become more empathetic, more spiritually attuned. They show less fear of death and often talk about seeing or feeling more than before. Some even display heightened intuitive abilities. But perhaps the most heartwarming reports come from what children say they saw while on the other side. Many describe beautiful gardens filled with other children. They say they were being cared for by beings of light, sometimes angels, sometimes glowing figures who felt like family. One little girl, Sarah, nearly drowned at age 5. When she was revived, she told her parents she'd been in a big, colorful garden where lots of kids were playing. She said angels were there, watching over them. And get this, she said that some kids were waiting for their mommies and daddies to arrive. It's an image that echoes again and again in these stories. Children not in fear or confusion, but in joy, love, and peace. Skeptics often try to explain these experiences with science, saying they're just oxygen-deprived hallucinations. But that explanation falls short when kids report things they couldn't possibly have known. Details about people they've never met. Conversations they couldn't have overheard. Accurate memories from moments they were clinically gone. Science hasn't figured out how to account for that, and maybe it's not meant to. Maybe these near-death experiences are glimpses, tiny windows into what awaits on the other side, especially for the souls who leave us too soon. Let's go even deeper now, into one of the most detailed and compassionate spiritual systems ever developed to explain what happens after death: Spiritism. In the 19th century, a French educator named Allan Kardec began studying mediumistic phenomena, not with superstition, but with curiosity and method. He wasn't looking for ghost stories. He was trying to understand why we're here, where we go, and what all of this means. What emerged from his work is what we now call the Spiritist doctrine. And when it comes to the souls of children, this doctrine offers some of the most beautiful and hopeful explanations ever written. Spiritism sees the universe as a school, and Earth as just one of many classrooms. According to this view, before a soul incarnates, it goes through a kind of planning session in the spiritual world. Alongside loving mentors, it chooses the family, the body, the challenges, and even the duration of its time on Earth. Sometimes that plan includes a long, complex life filled with lessons. Other times, it's short, focused, and incredibly intense. So when a child is born and dies young, it's not seen as an accident. It's seen as a soul who came for a very specific reason. Maybe that soul came to awaken a deep kind of love in the parents, or to soften a hardened heart, or to catalyze spiritual growth that could only happen through the pain of loss. These aren't punishments, they're missions. Imagine you're in college and you take a one-semester course that fills a particular gap in your education. It's short, yes, but it's exactly what you needed. Some souls, Spiritism teaches, come for a brief course and then return home. Chico Xavier, one of Brazil's most revered mediums, often received messages from these young souls. One of the recurring themes: gratitude. Many of the spirits described how much love they felt during their short lives, how the experience, no matter how brief, completed something sacred in their own evolution. And they didn't stop loving their families just because they passed. In fact, Spiritism teaches that children who disincarnate young often remain close to their families in spirit. They visit, they protect, they send signs of affection. They're not gone, they're just in a different room. What's even more beautiful is the Spiritist vision of what happens to them on the other side. According to numerous mediumistic communications, there are entire spiritual colonies, realms devoted to the care and development of children who pass away early. These places aren't cold hospitals or ghostly limbos. They're vibrant, loving nurseries filled with light, music, nature, and learning. Spirits who lost children in their own lives often volunteer to care for these little ones. They become spiritual parents, teachers, guides. One of the most touching descriptions comes from a Spiritist doctor named Bezerra de Menezes. He described these colonies as full of joy, where children play, learn, and continue to grow emotionally and spiritually. They are never alone. Even while their earthly parents are still living, these children can remain connected, watching over them, sending inspiration, visiting in dreams. There are even reports of children saying they help guide their future siblings into the family, that they choose when and how to return, sometimes as a little brother, a niece, or even a best friend later in life. Spiritism doesn't just tell us what happens, it gives us a map. And maybe more importantly, it gives comfort. It shows that there's structure, intelligence, and above all, love woven into every life, no matter how short. That behind the loss is a purpose. And behind the veil is a family waiting with open arms, Now let's turn to something that may be less structured than religious doctrine, but no less powerful: spontaneous spiritual communication. These are the moments that happen quietly, unexpectedly. Moments that often leave parents stunned, comforted, and changed. We're not talking about formal mediumship or seances. We're talking about ordinary people, often grieving parents, who suddenly feel, hear, or even see something that lets them know their child is still near. Take Sarah, for example. She lost her daughter Emma at just 3 years old in a tragic home accident. In the weeks that followed, Sarah was devastated, barely able to function under the weight of her grief. Then one night, while straightening up Emma's room, she suddenly felt something shift. The air softened. A presence filled the room. And then, clear as day, she heard her daughter's little laugh. Not from memory, not imagined, but present. She also smelled Emma's favorite floral scent, one she hadn't smelled in weeks. And when she turned around, one of Emma's toys, one she hadn't touched, was resting on her bed. To Sarah, it wasn't just coincidence. It was Emma saying, "Mommy, I'm still here, just in a different way." These kinds of moments are more common than you might think. Dr. Bill Guggenheim and his wife Judy spent years studying these spontaneous after-death communications. They collected over 3,000 cases, and what they found was remarkable. Children are among the most frequent communicators. Why? Because, as we've discussed, their energy is different. Children who pass away early don't carry the heavy mental clutter that adults do. They're not bogged down by trauma, regret, or fear. Their energy stays light, open, and very close to the people they loved most. They don't need complicated rituals to make contact. They just reach out. And often, it's in the form of dreams. But not ordinary dreams. These dreams are vivid, visceral. They feel more real than waking life, and they stay with people for years. Maria, a mother from Brazil, lost her 5-year-old son João to illness. 3 months after his passing, she had a dream. In it, João was playing in a radiant park, surrounded by children. He ran to her, hugged her, and said, "Mommy, I'm okay. Grandma is here taking care of me." Maria woke up with tears running down her face, but also with peace in her heart. She knew it wasn't just a dream. It was a visit. There are also the physical signs: lights flickering, toys turning on by themselves, songs playing at exactly the right moment, and sometimes what feels like coincidence goes way beyond chance. One mother was driving during a heavy storm, overwhelmed with grief. She suddenly heard her daughter's voice clearly say, "Mommy, stop the car." She slammed the brakes, and seconds later, a huge tree crashed down in front of her. Sometimes, these communications come through other children. Parents have shared stories of toddlers speaking to invisible siblings. Babies reaching out for someone no one else can see. One little boy, just 2 years old, began pointing at a photo of his deceased sister, someone he'd never met, and said, "That's my best friend. She plays with me when I sleep." Renowned medium James Van Praagh has said that children in spirit retain their personality, their humor, their quirks. That's why when they do come through, parents often know it's them. They feel it in their bones. And perhaps that's the most comforting part of all this. These aren't cold ghost stories. These are moments of pure love. Messages that say, "I'm still me, I'm still close, and I still love you." Now that we've explored how children might reach out from beyond, let's talk about the beings who meet them there. Those spiritual guardians whose sole mission is to protect, guide, and care for the youngest souls. Because in many spiritual traditions, the passing of a child is not met with emptiness, it's met with an escort. These aren't just metaphorical ideas. These guardians are described in vivid detail across religions, philosophies, and mystical teachings. In Christianity, guardian angels are assigned to each soul at the moment of conception. But when it comes to children, especially those who die young, there's believed to be a special kind of angel. They're sometimes called the angels of innocence. Mystics, like Padre Pio, spoke of these beings in deeply personal terms, describing how their energy is attuned to a child's purity, gentle, joyful, and full of light. Even Saint Thomas Aquinas, in his Summa Theologica, described an angelic hierarchy in which certain angels are specifically tasked with the protection and guidance of children, not only in life, but especially in death. Their job isn't just to watch over, it's to walk with, to gently take the child's hand and lead them across the veil into the arms of love. In Islam, there are the Malaika, the angels of divine order. According to Islamic tradition, when a child dies, they're received immediately by these beings and taken to paradise. There's a hadith that describes these children resting in gardens, playing joyfully under the care of light-filled angels, awaiting the day their parents arrive to join them. And these angels? They often take forms that comfort the child. A beloved grandparent, a favorite animal, an imaginary friend who, it turns out, may never have been imaginary at all. Judaism also speaks of divine messengers, Malachim, tasked with guarding each child's life journey. Some Kabbalistic teachings go even deeper, saying every child's angel knows their soul's full mission and never abandons them. When a child dies, that angel becomes their personal guide in the afterlife, helping them understand their time on earth and preparing them for future incarnations. And then, in Hindu belief, there are the devas, beings of light and consciousness. Some of these devas are said to function as cosmic mothers, welcoming children who pass away before completing their physical development. They offer warmth, healing, and love in forms so gentle that the soul of the child continues to thrive without fear or trauma. But perhaps no tradition describes this reality in as much loving detail as Spiritism. Through mediumistic communications documented by Allan Kardec and others, we've learned about entire communities in the spiritual world devoted exclusively to the care of children. There are spirits, often those who lost children in their own lifetimes, who now volunteer as caretakers in these places. Think of them as spiritual nurses, mentors, and adoptive parents. These spirit caregivers understand children's needs because they remember. They know how to calm fear, how to play, how to guide a soul through the confusion of disincarnation. The Brazilian medium, Divaldo Franco, has received many messages from children describing their caregivers. One child wrote, "When I got here, great-grandma was already waiting. She took me to a beautiful house full of colors and music. I'm not alone. I'm safe, and I can visit you whenever I want." These guides are not just guardians for the children, they're also bridges to the living. They help facilitate those spontaneous moments of connection, the dreams, the smells, the laughter in the wind. They protect both ends of the bond, ensuring that the love between parent and child doesn't break under the weight of grief. They hold space, they hold hope. And maybe most importantly, they hold the child until the family is whole again. As we near the end of this journey, one thing becomes beautifully clear. When a child departs this world, it isn't an ending. It's a continuation, a shift into another form of existence, watched over by layers of love we cannot see but can often feel. In every tradition we've explored, in the philosophies of the East and West, in ancient scriptures and modern testimonies, in spontaneous signs and near-death stories, there's one common thread. The soul of a child is sacred, and that sacredness is recognized by the universe, by divine beings, by ancestors, and perhaps most importantly, by the child themselves. Because if you ask anyone who's experienced one of these mystical moments, a dream, a sign, a feeling in the chest, when they walk into their child's room, they'll tell you, the connection doesn't end. It changes shape, yes, but it never breaks. These children often return, sometimes through reincarnation, sometimes in dreams, and sometimes as the little voice that whispers guidance when you least expect it. Spiritist teachings even say that children who pass early are often reunited with their families later in life through new births or deep friendships. It's a concept that reshapes how we think about grief, not as separation, but as rearrangement. And as hard as it is to hear, some souls choose short lives as a form of service, to awaken something in us, to help us grow, to open hearts that may have stayed closed otherwise. These are not lessons anyone would choose willingly. No parent should have to learn this kind of pain. But if there's one thing all of these spiritual frameworks agree on, it's this: these children were not lost. They were guided, escorted, welcomed, and they continue to exist in a state of peace, joy, and most of all, love. If you're someone who's lost a child, or even just held this fear in your heart, let this message settle in deeply. They are okay. They are still with you. And the love you shared wasn't wasted. It was the whole point. In Spiritism, there's a phrase that says, "Love is the only thing we take with us when we go." Your child took yours, and they're still holding it. They'll carry it through dimensions, across lifetimes, and one day, when it's your turn to cross over, you'll see them again. Not as a vague memory, not as a fading light, but as a soul still glowing with the same laugh, the same love, and the same unbreakable bond you created together. So take comfort in this. The question that brought us here, what happens to the souls of children, may never have just one answer. But in every culture, every story, and every experience, one truth remains constant. They are held, they are cherished, and they are home.